Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
This week, a look at the history of the state capitol memorials honoring veterans of the Korean conflict, the Vietnam War, and military families. Plus, images honoring the workers who painstakingly restored the state capitol. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. The Korean War is viewed as a frozen conflict because a peace treaty was never signed and the conflict lives on. A memorial to Korean War veterans on the state capitol grounds honors those who fought and who died. 748 Minnesotans died in the Korean War, which began in June of 1950 and ended in July of 1953. Paul Mandell of the Capital Area Architectural Planning Board joins me here at the Korean Memorial. What was the impetus for this memorial?
Well, after the Vietnam War memorial went in, the Korean War, of course, it was called a conflict, not even a war. They considered themselves the forgotten war. And even though they had a plaque, just like the Vietnam folks had, they said, well, we were forgotten, so can we get a memorial? And at the time, the Korean Memorial in Washington, D.C. had gone in just opposite the Vietnam Memorial. So this site became important sort of as a mirror to the Vietnam Memorial. Of course, they were older. We had two gentlemen that we work with through the main part of the group, and they're known with their blue jackets when they dress up. So we had the entryway, you have the various aspects, and even in the stone, which has now been replicated in the plaque inside the memorial space, you had the important dates of the conflict, as well as all the countries represented that took part in the war.
Yes, because the United States was just one of many that was involved in this conflict, which is ongoing because there was no peace treaty signed.
We have explained to them that, I mean, even as recent as these past few years, when Korea flares up, we've explained to them that if we go back and there's deaths, those names would be added. And even because of that, the fact that the war technically was never ended, they had an armistice, the names here, unlike in Vietnam where they're by date, here they're just scattered among. So all the names are included, but they're not in any particular order. So if you have a name added later on, there's no distinction between that name and the previous names.
Probably the most striking feature of this memorial is the sculpture of the soldier looking at his silhouette. What's being conveyed?
Probably the most important element is his search for his comrades, search for answers. I mean, those of us who grew up with MASH, you know, you see the questions, what is the end point, what is the goal, how do we know if we've succeeded, the fact that it never ended, the fact that it was just an armistice and not even a treaty. He walks towards his silhouette in the obelisk, which is larger than life, and actually it's on line with the Capitol Dome. So he's coming back to Minnesota. It was interesting because the vets studied the mock-up of this, and they were like, no, the belt would not be like that. No, these hand grenades were, in 1952, they were not the hand grenades of the Vietnam War and the fatigues, and right down to the belt buckles and everything else. They studied every detail of this guy, and the sculptor kept, while it was still in clay, kept molding it.
What are some of the unique features of this particular memorial?
Here, just like in the Vietnam Memorial, we have a map of Korea showing the Sea of Japan, the two Koreas, China. A lot of international folks have come here, and we have all the countries represented, both in the flooring and now in the plaque, that represent all the nations. So all the nations are included, even though this is the Minnesota Memorial. On the sides of the obelisks, we have, at first it was going to be the seals of the different branches of the armed forces, which we figured wouldn't mean anything to anyone except the members of the armed forces. So we have like a tank and a soldier on their feet for the infantry. We have a plane for the Air Force. We have ships for the Navy. So we made it literal representations of the different branches of the armed forces. And then the names, in part, like we have them alphabetical, but like I said, scattered among the letters, so there's no order, there's no first name or last name type, who's first and who's last type thing. And if we added names, it would be very democratic, and you wouldn't know that that was an added name.
The Korean conflict memorial was completed in 1998. It's been more than 20 years now since it was placed here. What are you hearing from people that have visited over the years?
Probably it's one of the more reflective and meditative ones. I mean, the Vietnam was, because some of the people had trouble getting up to the wall, this one is so approachable, and it really, they can get into this intimate space. They can sit, they can go off in the lawn area, they can go up and touch the names, but they can also just study the soldier and sit there and study the soldier or his silhouette. When people come to visit the governor's office from foreign countries, this is one of the ones they stop at for some reason, and they come down and they'll often contact the Korean veterans because a lot of their dignitaries, a lot of their people will purposely, they'll have a visiting group from Japan or whatever else, and they'll always come to this memorial because of the country's connection to that conflict.
U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War ended in 1973 with almost 60,000 American fatalities. The Minnesota Vietnam Veterans Memorial honors the valor and service of the Minnesotans who gave their lives. We're here at the Minnesota Vietnam Veterans Memorial on the state capitol grounds. I'm joined by Paul Mandell of the Capital Area Architectural Planning Board. How did this memorial come to be?
As far back as like '89, they had started radio ads and they were selling T-shirts, and they were trying to raise Teresa Vetter, who is from Mankato, one of the people that started along with several veterans that were on the board. And they were basically selling T-shirts, bumper stickers, everything they could do. They did a radio feed, and one of the legislators heard it and said, well, you need more money than you're going to make that way, and sponsored a piece of legislation with $300,000. And then over the next few years, we had a design competition. They were thinking small, we were thinking big, because the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. was so huge. And we convinced them to do a national design competition. So we won the design competitions. And I remember we were thinking we'd get maybe 50 to 80, maybe 100 submitters, and we had over 218 submitters. Quite some wild ideas. We had to dismiss a few that were way out of scale. It was supposed to be a total budget of, I believe, $700,000, and then with the state money, they matched that over time, and we got to where we are today. And it was dedicated in '92.
It's a large plaza in the shape of Minnesota. What do the various elements represent?
Well, you've got the arrival home. You come up the river, Mississippi River, and you arrive at home, which is the limestone remnant of the home building. And then the state of Minnesota is very, very, I mean, one of the concerns when this design was picked was that it was too literal. You have Mississippi River, you have Lake Superior, you have the shape of Minnesota. Over the process of the design, it actually got more literal by adding the towns where people came from, et cetera. And in the design process, originally, what's limestone was granite, what's granite was limestone in the design, and the name wall was going to be on the wall facing north. And it was pointed out that that would be in the shadow all the time, and the ice during the winter would be piling up. So then it was moved to the north wall facing south, so it'd get the sun. And there was an objection to that because that's represented Canada, the Canadian border, where people fled if they were conscientious objectors. So then, in the result, that was going to be a limestone wall, and now it's granite, and everything else became the limestone. So it was an iterative evolutionary design process that we went through.
Was the idea of the Granite Wall with the names of those killed or missing in action a nod to the Veterans Memorial, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C.?
I suspect it was. One, because it was so evocative, and I mean, it was dark, it was into the ground, it was highly reflective, and people saw themselves. One thing about polished granite is you see yourself in it too, so it's an interactive type thing. In addition, it's more legible when you have polished granite with names, as opposed to, for instance, limestone. In the Workers' Memorial, we had to infill with paint. So I think probably subconsciously for the designers, yes. I mean, there were a lot of designs that had no stone, had no granite. They had piles of dirt, or they had guns with the bayonets in the ground with the helmets and stuff like that. But this one probably won because it was a touchstone in effect. But it's also more legible and accessible for people to see from a distance and up close. And you see yourself, and you can also see the Capitol at a certain point. in a reflection.
As far as I know, though, the Vietnam War is the first war where there are lists of those who were killed and missing in action. And this is another one of those.
That was intentional. You always see the general on the horses or the commander of the infantry or whatever. But Vietnam, it was all, I mean, we had the plaques in the Court of Honor and those recognized by numbers and such like that. But this was, you know, these were, they had a chip on their shoulder because they came back, they were either forgotten or they were spat on, mistreated. The benefits weren't coming forward. Just all around the nation had abandoned them basically, and they had been lied to in the war. So they wanted to recognize the common person that fought in the war.
At the top of the wall, there is a portion of a poem by writer and poet Archibald MacLeish that says, "We were young, we have died, remember us." That's a pretty direct statement.
That was chosen by the client group, and the minute it got up on the, well, I think before it even got on the wall, but after it got on the wall, it was very controversial with some of their own people because the wall includes both those missing and assumed POWs. So they didn't like the fact that it just stopped at "we have died." So the different names are noted by either a filled-in diamond or just a outlined diamond. And as the bodies have been recovered or people have been the remains have returned, we have the diamonds filled in then to acknowledge that they have died and accounted for.
Have you heard from people who visit this memorial? What do people say about it? Is it standing the test of time?
I think so. It was interesting. Probably for the first dozen years, they'd have ceremonies here, and all the nations. The Vietnam War involved people from the Philippines and Australia, a number. So you get probably the biggest assortment, other than the World War II. You get the biggest assortment of people from different nationalities. But for the first dozen years, I mean, we would hear stories of people that would come in from like the hillside here where we have the larch trees, or the north side where there used to be more poplar trees, and they couldn't get to the wall. Literally, physically could not bring themselves to go to the wall and touch the names. It was such a tragic event in their lives. So they would hang back, and you'd see people hanging back here, and their families or friends might go forward, and they'd like, "No, I'm not ready for that." And slowly, over time, they'd get closer and closer. We heard countless stories like that. And then, in the end, it became so literal, people really just wedded to the design itself. And then when you get to the wall, if you're at the south end of the wall, you see the reflection of the Capitol in the wall, which is really, I don't think it had been accounted for in the design, but it worked out really nice.
And to this day, you still see flags and flowers, as are behind us. People are still coming to remember.
And people, they don't have a museum. Originally, the Veterans Service Building was supposed to have a museum on the other wing that never got built. But they do reclaim anything that's of a permanence. I mean, some people have left medals and important letters and documents. And those are retrieved by the veterans and kept in an archive in the building. I've never seen it, but like the flowers and stuff are just left. But if there's something of permanent value, they will retrieve that and document it and such. This was the first war that was literally fought in our living rooms. And
people watched it on television.
People saw it happening as it happened. People saw the two sides of the story. People saw our nation being torn apart. This gave a process of healing. I mean, I remember the controversy in Washington, D.C. when that wall was built. I was working for the federal government one block away and watched that being built and watched the people coming and going, this is a terrible memorial, and other people going, this is a wonderful, it's got a wound. Our wound is still open. This was a wonderful healing process, and the people that, started the Korean military family tribute, it's always been about the healing. We don't glorify war. We don't politicize war here. We remember those that gave their lives or served. And we honor the sacrifice, but we also honor why they did it. I mean, what drove them to do it. Obviously, some people were drafted and had no choice. But the healing that took place over time is always important to remember.
Restoring the state capitol to reflect the grandeur of architect Cass Gilbert's 1905 vision while upgrading its electrical and mechanical systems to modern standards was a huge undertaking. Photographer Tom Olmscheid documented the workers who took on this very important task. We're here in the basement of the Capitol in the Star of the North vault, where there are photographs of the workers who restored the Capitol on display both in the vault and around the outside of the vault. I'm joined by Tom Olmscheid, who is a retired house photographer who had the bright idea to document these workers as they restored our Capitol. Where did this idea come from?
Well, the idea really got started when they started to remove the paintings from the Capitol. So in one of the hearing rooms, there was a painting of the Battle of New Ulm, and that's brought me up to the Capitol to photograph that being removed. At the same time, when they had it removed, the workers were standing around. And that's when the light bulb sort of went off, and I decided to kind of concentrate on the workers, or thought I could concentrate on the workers and actually show the people that did the work on the restoration of the Capitol building.
How long did this project take?
It took about 6 years, and it was coming up once a month. I had a person I could call and set up a time. Then I would meet him, bring my hard hat and my vest, and we would go through the Capitol. We'd probably spend about 2.5 hours. And during that time, if I saw the right lighting and the right character and the right occupation, I would ask the person if I could do their photograph. And most of the time, they said yes. So it made it easy.
How did you approach each worker and decide how to frame each photograph?
I wanted to show them full figure with the clothes that they had on, and then the tools that they were using. So I always had them either holding their tools or their tools were nearby. I thought it was really important to show the tools that they were using and the clothing that they're wearing. A lot of them were wearing Under Armour in the winter, and back when they first built the Capitol, it was all wool. And, so I really wanted to show what they were wearing and the tools they were using.
And these photographs are all different kinds of workers. You wrote, when you wrote about this project, about the diversity that you wanted to show, because there are both people who work in the foreground, people who work in the background, dark conditions, cramped conditions. What were some of the challenges that you faced in taking these photographs?
Most of it was just the lighting and getting into areas that I would like to get into. I was here with another person from Dunn Construction, and we were walking around, and sometimes it was based on the amount of time that he had to guide me around the building. But a lot of times it was just working in the light and what kind of, where we were, was there enough light? Shooting at real slow shutter speeds to, get a good image. And those were some of the really big challenges. Just getting up on the scaffolding, hauling that equipment. I had to go into a harness one time to get up onto the top of the Capitol building. There were a lot of challenges. And then it was just, finding time for me to come down and do the photography. But it was shooting, the architectural changes, and then also shooting the workers. And I used a separate camera to shoot just the workers. And then the hardest part was going back and editing, making sure I got the right name on the right photograph. So that was really some of the time-consuming part of it.
Do you have a favorite?
There's a worker, and she's smoothing concrete, and it's real
I've seen that one.
Stark. And I just like the angles and the lighting that was down in that area at the time. So,
why did you choose black and white?
When I started here in 1975 as one of the house photographers, we all shot black and white. And black and white has sort of a more historical value to it. And color can sometimes be distracting. So if you shoot in black and white, you sort of focus on the person, and you get a good look at their face and what they're holding or what they're wearing. So
they're displayed here on the basement, and a lot of these workers worked in conditions that are not ideal conditions. It's interesting to me that they're displayed sometimes here in good light, but in other places not good light, and that almost where these photographs inhabit now represents, in a way, the conditions that those workers toiled in.
Yeah, I mean, you know, actually this area they're displayed pretty well down here. I really like where they're displayed. I like the stone that the images are hanging on, and I don't know, it's just, this was kind of an area that was dedicated to the workers. There's a worker plaque to the original workers on the state capitol. I think now that they've fully restored the basement of the Capitol building, it used to just be a tunnel, that this is really a beautiful place in the Capitol. Yeah, I think it's really appropriate that they're down in this space.
When people visit this space and they see these photographs that you've taken, what do you want them to take away?
You know, I'd like them to take away that this is a nice cross-section of the workers and a good kind of inside look at what they look like and the tools that they used during the restoration of the Capitol building.
The Military Family Tribute consists of story stones recalling correspondence between soldiers and their families during wartime, as well as the Gold Star Table, which is dedicated to the families who lost a loved one in military service. The story stones that are part of the Military Family Tribute is one of my favorite memorials here on the Capitol grounds. These 87 stones representing the 87 counties of Minnesota are really a poignant reminder of the toll that war takes both on the people who fight and their families who stay back home. How did this memorial come to be?
Bill and Terry Pop, they came to us. He had been involved in some fundraising for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and they wanted to recognize the families that give up their kids to these wars. And so they came to us. They started the foundation. They started a nonprofit. Then they took part in the design competition. They worked through the design. They worked on selection of the stones and the selection of the stories and the letters, and etc. Each county was supposed to supply at least 2 letters representing that county's contribution. Then they had an editorial group that would then select from the letters the best excerpts, and basically it was 1 or 2 sentences, maybe 3 sentences, that sort of captured the emotions of that letter.
As I walk through these story stones, I like to try to imagine, without even looking at the date, what era they maybe come from. It's so interesting, the language, the turn of phrase, to try to imagine the lives. These excerpts humanize the toll of war, the experience of war, so much.
Yeah. The real nice thing is, I mean, some of the stories, some of the quotes talk about the war or the horror of war, and some of them talk about simple things like, boy, I miss macaroni and cheese or peanut butter and jelly, and say hi to, my niece, type thing. I miss fishing. It's very human, extremely human.
As you walk among the stones, there's seemingly no organizational layout to their placement, but there actually is.
There is. They're laid out in constellations, the 7 constellations of the Northern Hemisphere, which is where most of our wars have been fought. Originally, there was going to be connecting pavers so that they would show that this, like the stars. It always helps us, you can point to Orion as the 3 stars, but it helps if you can see a belt. So they were going to be connecting stones, and then in the design work, as the memorial went forward, we figured that 1, they might be tripping hazards, 2, they might cause diversion of water, and they might end up being more problematic. And the stones are of such a scale, they ended up a lot bigger than anyone anticipated. So you'd have to be 100 feet, 1,000 feet in the air and actually see the layout and make the connection, because how many of us look up at the stars and can pinpoint all the constellations, because they're just dots. But again, the same constellations are seen in the Gold Star Table at the other end of the walk, where you have the North Star in the center and the 7 constellations are laid out as they would be in the Northern Hemisphere sky. And then it's more clear because you can see the connections.
So these story stones are just one aspect of the Military Family Tribute. There's the stones, there's this curved walkway with trees on either side, and then the Gold Star Table. Correct. Tell us about the Gold Star Table.
Well, the importance of the table, of course, is the family table. Everyone comes back. At one point, we were going to have seats and one missing. But everyone gathers at the family table, and that's when they tell their stories and everything else. The gold star, which is the bottom of the table, is polished, and it's a gold. There's actually a light underneath inside the table that bounces down onto the gold and bounces back up. So at night, if you're here during the dark time, you would see the constellation holes, the perforations lit up. The opposite is true, and I don't know if this was actually anticipated, but on a sunny day like today, if the sun is high enough, you can see the constellations on the gold bottom because it's coming through the table.
And the gold star, that represents the loss of a family member.
Correct.
Due to war.
There's gold star, there's bronze star, there's blue, and different stars representing one in service, one abroad. And bronze is someone who has died, but not, the gold star is someone who gave their life on the battle scene. And so that was always going to be part of, at one point the design had 2 tables, and they decided out of deference just to focus on the gold star. And there's gold star families now that are recognized in special ways too.
Many aspects of this tribute were well thought out, including the flower beds at the end and the choice of trees that line the walkway. What do they symbolize?
Well, the flower beds we have, now we have red lilies and red roses. At one point we were also going to have red poppies, and they propagate very fruitfully and take over the garden. There are still some poppies, I believe, but the color red, of course, is, you see the red poppies. At times the veterans bring them out and as memorials, and people put them on their lapels. The trees are red maples, so in the fall they all turn bright red, again, invoking the red color that is so common.
Each year, state fairgoers are asked to take an opinion poll on pressing state issues. Questions are developed from among the numerous bills proposed by lawmakers and represent pressing issues and concerns that remain unresolved. You'll find the Minnesota Senate booth and the House of Representatives booth inside the Education Building on Cosgrove Street at the State Fairgrounds. In addition to making your views known by taking the separate polls offered by the Senate and the House, you may have the opportunity to visit with one or more lawmakers frequently on hand to listen to the concerns of fairgoers. The Education Building also houses booths of some of Minnesota's nonprofit and educational institutions, offers robotics demonstrations by middle and high school students, and displays art, writing, and craft projects demonstrating the work of some of Minnesota's most talented kids. If you happen to find yourself at the Great Minnesota Get-Together this summer, don't forget to stop by the Minnesota Senate booth in the Education Building to provide your perspective on this year's State Fair opinion poll. Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.